to Two Roads Crossing, a podcast production of the Christian Veterinary Mission. Do you wonder how your faith fits together with your profession? Well, join us as we explore how to live well at the intersection of two roads crossing.
Well, hello and welcome to Two Roads Crossing. My name is Barry Schwenk. I'm a pastor, a veterinarian, and your guest today as we explore the intersection of faith and veterinary medicine. Curtis,
yes,
how are you?
I'm good. I love this. This is episode 100 for the podcast, or episode 1 of Two Hosts Crossing, the new podcast. Now, just
I love it. I love it.
That would be a fun podcast, but
it would be.
Two Hosts Crossing. We'll file that away in the if the day was 48 hours long and not 24 hours, because you are a busy guy. And so before we get into some fun interview stuff, thanks for joining us today on episode 100, Barry.
I know, like the fact that we're at episode 100 is amazing. I think back, it's crazy thinking, we've talked about this idea of a podcast for a long time. And then when it finally happened, wondered whether we get past episode 2. And then I think I even mentioned, I think at one point, my goal was just to have enough episodes that if someone wanted to sit down and listen for 24 hours straight, that might be a good YouTube video, actually, just listening to Two Roads Crossing continuously for 24 hours. When we got there, I thought, oh, this is amazing. And so congratulations on getting to episode 100. That's quite the feat.
Hey, yeah. I mean, you still have the majority of them. So we thank you for that. And, you're thinking about that 24-hour thing. That could also help underperforming employees somewhere. You could threaten them with having to listen
That's right.
24 straight hours. Yeah.
It can go, you can use it for so many different things, so many different
uses. Children, correcting out of over children, all kind of things.
It's funny because my daughter Emily is the intro and outro voice for Two Roads Crossing, and my boys, every time I'll pop an episode on, start listening to it, and they're like, "Oh, Dad, do we have to listen to her again?" Yep, one more time. That's all.
Yep, and no plans to change, by the way.
Nope, so I appreciate that. She's
speaking of the challenge of Two Hosts Crossing would be all the hats you have on and all the family stuff. Bring us up to date. What's been going on in your life, Barry?
Yeah, no, it's part of the podcast transition for me was just part of evaluating where our family was and all the things that were going on. So I'm continuing to pastor full time. Just had the joy of Holy Week, which was phenomenal. Church continues to grow, and the amount of outreach, and it's amazing how much God has blessed that. And then in addition to that, I've been working at the clinic 2 days a week, so getting about 20 hours at the small animal hospital, which has also been a huge ministry opportunity. There's just such a shortage of veterinarians and veterinary care, and also those that have persevered through this shortage. They're just, so many folks are tired and burned out and struggling. It's been such a blessing to be in the hospital, to work with folks, to talk through things with folks, to be there with clinic with clients, and so that's been a huge blessing. My daughter I'm getting ready next week to go pick her up from Azusa Pacific. She finishes her 3rd year of college. I've got my son Jonas will be going into his senior year the same time she goes into her senior year, one in high school, one in college. And then my son Simon is in as a freshman. He's got some interest in veterinary medicine, so he's been going to the clinic with me on weekends. So that's been a lot of fun just to share that too. And then still have some coaching duties. I've kind of cut back a little bit on those things. I'm going from our recording here. I'm headed over to the middle school. Our middle school team went undefeated this year, so I'm going to go pass out some medals and do the coach thing. Yeah. Well, and I was telling you earlier, it's strange because I'm going to go from going to the coach banquet at the school, going over to the hospice care center to visit with some folks from our church, and then I'm back over to the school to pick up my boys, and then we're going to work on some plumbing issues at the house. So there's just like there's no end. There's no end to the joy that is my life.
There you go. You go coach hat. You go, well,
Yeah,
actually, wearing CVM hat now, right? Then
yeah,
you go
that's right.
coach hat, then you go pastor hat, and you got to switch to, I believe it's some hospice care stuff. And so
Yeah,
that's not unlike treating that new puppy. And then all of a sudden you go in
right.
the next room and you got the other, and then you go dad hat at the end of the day with what's left. And that's
I'm sure at some point in time I'll get a text from the clinic, and I may need to follow up with a client on some blood work as well. So yeah, there's always, you never know. You never
that
know.
hat. Yep.
Just
What's
one of
it
those
been
things.
like? What's it been like to step back into more veterinary work
Yeah.
than you had been doing? What's that been like, or what are you noticing either about the vet profession or just about maybe yourself that it's been kind of like stepping back into that more? What's that been like?
So I will say that the largest volume of my most recent reading material has all been veterinary
Mhm.
related. I think last year was my first year back after a decade or more of being gone from U.S. clinical work. I think I racked up something like 65 CE hours during last year, just trying to, there's been so much that has changed. I, it's interesting though. I There's that whole, I think we all have that kind of imposter syndrome that we really, if everyone ever found out what we really know and what we then we would be in big trouble, right? And I feel that at times at home, at times in the church, at times at the clinic, and I'm just realizing that it's a lot. It's probably more me than it is anybody else, and so I've just started. Doing all the things to provide what I can in those moments, and I've been horribly surprised at, from a veterinary perspective, one, how much of that just comes back naturally.
Yeah.
And so that's been very good. I've got a good mentor at the clinic who I work with once a week to go over, maybe some things that are new, some new medications, treatments, treatment plans. Even with my return to surgery, it was nice being observed for multiple procedures before I was let go on my own and stuff. So that was a big confidence booster. I'm really surprised, the struggle that and the after effects from COVID are still really strong. And I think the opportunity, not just with the people that I work with, but also with the clients that I serve, there's a little bit of a different atmosphere than what I was used to from the very beginning. And it's hard. I don't think it's gotten any easier over the years. And so I've really appreciated more of those folks that have stayed the course and have done a good job. But I've also realized that veterinary medicine is just a part of who I am. So when you talk about those many hats, it's the doctor, pastor, coach, dad kind of combination. And so I've learned, I think, a better way of just finding some balance with all of those things to enjoy each one for what it is, and allow myself to kind of be in the moment as opposed to being in a moment thinking about the other thing. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes I get so distracted at home thinking about what I'm going to be doing somewhere else that I lose my at-home moments. So over the last few months, it's been really good finding the ability to be present in each of those moments and enjoying those different aspects of my life and who I am. Yeah, as a pastor, as a dad, as a veterinarian, as a coach.
Yeah, I think one of the things that stands out, and there's a lot, I'm kind of jotting some notes of things I want to bring out in what you say. One of them is I think it takes a very good posture. So let me compliment you on that. Of you're entering back into it. It's not that you hadn't been doing some when you were long-term missions or all that, but you're right. You're really stepping back into it's not unlike somebody who has taking time off to have a family or whatever. And we're seeing a lot of that vet med.
Yeah.
So here you are, you're not a newbie, but you have what you said was a mentor,
Right.
because things have changed. And that's, to some people, that would be tough. So let me ask you, what are, and it shouldn't be, but it's a great, humble, Christ-like stance. So what are the keys to you stepping back into veterinary medicine, even though you have been a veterinarian? And also from the other side, whoever your mentor is, what have been some of the keys from them? What advice would you give to somebody that finds himself in that spot too?
Yeah. Well, and so interestingly enough, when we transitioned back from Ethiopia, I'm a veterinarian, right? It's part of who I am. It's part of what I love, part of what I do. But when we transitioned back to Arizona, there just wasn't a way for me to be relicensed in the state of Arizona because of the way the law was set up, and the fact that I'd been out of the country for so long. And so the way the law read, when we came back, Arizona wanted me to retake all of my national board exams again. and I can do a lot of things, but that's not one of them, I think at this point in time. And so for me, that ability to go back into clinical practice, that door was closed. And when the door, because of the shortage of veterinarians, a lot of which was made evident even during the COVID crisis, when so many veterinary professionals stepped down because of that crisis, and the stress and the abuse and all those other things that went along with that, Arizona changed the law, which allowed me to then not have to take my national boards, take some other tests, and get licensed. And it was something that I had wanted to get back to, but had always really struggled with. Can I do it? Sure. Is it possible? And as my wife and I were talking, as Colette and I were talking and praying about it, like, if their time is right, the doors will open in the right situation, the right time. And if not, then it won't. We've seen open and closed doors our whole lives. We've grown accustomed to having some things slammed in our faces. And so we know, I mean, it's part of it. And I started, funny thing is that when you get a license, everyone somehow is made aware of that. And so all these offers start pouring in, and opportunities. And I started looking at a particular clinic that was about a 45-minute drive from our house. And when I went down to interview, the veterinarian who was the medical director there, I had met at a CBM booth in Vegas like several years before. Like, she had grown up in Ghana, and we had talked, and like we kind of knew each other. We didn't know each other well, but we both knew each other.
Yeah, you CBM connected. I got you. Yep.
Exactly. We recognized each other's faces and stuff. And so when I walked in, we're like, oh, hey, we know each other. And and so that made it a lot better, because one, she was kind of aware of where I was coming from. I felt comfortable enough that I knew her. She had a lot of experience. We had some shared life experience of living, in Africa for prolonged periods of our lives. And I was concerned about making the transition back, and she was equally concerned, but in the right way. Like, she's like, I don't want you to do anything that you're not comfortable with. And so what would you want from me? How can we do this? And I think it was funny because I went to a CE meeting, where we were doing dental procedures. And I was paired up with a veterinarian who had graduated during COVID. And she was mentioning how she had graduated from vet school and had not had an opportunity to do a surgery or to do a dental procedure before. And when she got into practice, she just started doing them. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm worried that, like, I had 10, 15 years of experience and then had taken a break. I'm like, I've done some before. I don't need to, like, do I need to worry as much? And so when I came back to the clinic, I said, look, I feel like some of that muscle memory will come back, but I want someone to hold me accountable. And so she was great about observing procedures, scheduling time, so that way she could observe procedures. We would review charts. Once we got, I think there was like a a 3 or 6 month kind of probationary period where we worked together before I started working alone. I still work with her 1 day a week. And so during that time, she will review charts from the day that I worked on my own and will say, hey, did you notice this? Did you think about this? I'll call her up and say, hey, I'm stuck here. And so just being available as a mentor, I think I appreciate for someone who's been in this profession for a prolonged period of time, making the time and providing an opportunity for someone who also, we're not competing against one another. We're kind of in this together. And so being a partner in that particular way is really important. So for someone I would say for someone who's been gone for a period of time, you're going to be appropriately nervous about going back, but trust what you know and be willing and humble enough to admit when you don't know, and find someone who then, as a mentor, if you've been in the business for a long time, be willing to share some of that insight, and don't be afraid to speak up and to share that kind of relationship, because I think it ultimately benefits our patients and our clients immensely.
Yeah. No, cheers to, I mean, that is it takes two, like any relationship, it takes you not being like prideful about 10 to 15 years experience, even if there was a little rust there because you went to either. And it takes somebody willing to, like you say, probably one of the greatest challenges is making the time, because everybody's already shorthanded. And then here comes, but boy, that posture is very cool. Well, how about, I didn't prep you for this, but best thing about going back into vet med and most challenging thing, or at least what kind of comes to mind?
So honestly, probably the most, there's certainly challenges. Everything in vet med so much of vet med changes on a daily basis. And I've kind of gone from landline to cell phone, right? Like I've had to make that transition, like, oh, there's an app. What's that do? And figuring out those systems. And for me, part of that, that just required extra study. It required a little extra time, knowing going into it that I was going to have to take that extra time so that it would set me up for later. That was really challenging. And the other part too was also, again, going back to the psychological aspect of it, was just trusting that, one, not putting myself in a bad situation, but two, trusting that I would be able to make that transition. And also, even as a practitioner, being able to say, you know what, I can't do this for you. I'm no longer comfortable with doing, eye surgeries. So I'm going to have to refer you to this other doctor or send you somewhere else. And being comfortable with saying, it's okay to say, I don't know, or I don't do this. I'm going to show you someone else who can do this. That was really challenging, but I think that once you get to that place, it's also more enjoyable, because then I feel like I'm truly acting in the best interest of my clients and my patients.
It's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. And I have thoroughly enjoyed, I've thoroughly enjoyed several things, really. The biggest, I think, has just been connecting with people in a different way again. The number of, this past week, this is going to sound so weird. This past week, I was in seeing a patient. The client's phone rang while I was in the exam room. That first inkling of mine was, she's like, I have to take this. I'm like, my time, right? And she's taking the phone call. She starts crying. She had been waiting for a call from her doctor and was diagnosed with cancer. And I got to sit there with her.
Yeah.
And I got to pray with her. And like, by the time that she left, we got her pet taken care of. But I think that being there for my clients, and I've had more of those. I mean, and most veterinarians certainly have had a lot of these conversations where clients come in and want to talk about their illnesses and their family and their struggles and their grief. And from a pastoral point of view, I like that. I
Yeah.
love being able to be there for people. I had a client come in this week. It was the first time that he had come out of his house for almost a decade. A Vietnam veteran that had started getting home health care, and part of his therapy, he was given a service dog. And so it was only his second time out of the house in 10 years. Wow. And he had come to the clinic to get his dog vaccinated. And I was able to just say, on behalf of my family and this nation, welcome home. I appreciate your service. And he started crying. Like, this was like, again, he's like, I never thought it would be worth me ever leaving my home again. He's like, I think I can do this. I'm like, I mean, those are the kinds of things that I love. And it has everything to do with that human animal bond and the connection that we share. So, which kind of actually is why I started doing this to begin with. So,
yeah. I mean, it strikes me, you come in from the pastoral point of view, but a lot of, like you say, a lot of our vet professionals get put in that seat, whether they're ready for it,
right.
That's one of the things we get asked most to do talks on, real life, real impacts or whatever, is how do I share my faith, or at least how do I be there for some? So what counsel would you give to someone that finds themselves in, for lack of a better term, a ministerial role in some of those moments, and or maybe they want to share their faith, depending on who owns the clinic and what they can say, but if they want to kind of share the reason for the hope of which they had, what would you tell people that find themselves in those spots?
So I have found I never walk into an exam room with the purpose of sharing the gospel. I walk into an exam room with the purpose of representing the gospel. And that means that I walk in and I want to engage with someone relationally where they are. And for some people, that means that the conversation is very brief. For others, it's a little bit longer. Sometimes I always begin by asking, I walk in, especially if it's someone I haven't met, I introduce myself. And then I ask them, how are you doing today? Are you doing okay? How's your week been? It's not just straight to business. It is, there's always paperwork and stuff that has to be done. So I'm multitasking, but at the same time, engaging with someone just as an individual, because for some of them, they haven't had a lot of opportunity to be heard or seen.
Yeah.
And so that's where it begins. Now, sometimes that gets me into trouble because that can put me behind the 8 ball as far as the schedule.
Sure.
Concerned.
Yeah, like 20-minute, 15-minute appointment time.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have time to but you'll be surprised at how many of those conversations very quickly, I garner enough information that we begin this relationship building. And there are people that it takes time. Sometimes there's, folks that I talk to multiple times before they're more vulnerable. Other times like that, like the lady that happened this week, I had never met her before. That was her first time into the hospital. And it was at that time. She's always going to remember the time when she got that news. Yep. And hopefully she remembers that there was someone that cared enough about her that took the time. And that's the first step. And I think that a lot of us, from a ministerial standpoint, we think that we have to have the right words to say in every situation. Yeah. And you don't.
You absolutely, yeah, no, you're right.
You just have to be there. You have to be there and say, I'm so sorry. Is there anything that I can do for you? That must be devastating. Is there anything I can do for you? Sometimes there's not a lot that you have to say. Sometimes it's just a willingness just to be present and listen a little. But then also finding the wisdom to know. And again, I have to be careful about this, of letting appointments slot. I mean, it's not therapy time, right? It's also, there are folks that are waiting, and then you have to apologize for being late. But I will also say this, when she walked out of the exam room, the person who came in after said, is she going to be okay? There are some people, I mean, granted, there are some people that are then, why did I have to wait 15 minutes? But then there are others that are also compassionate enough and concerning and discerning enough to know that what you're providing there is more than just, I want to take your money so I can give you the service. It is a connection. That makes it tough. I think sometimes, my technicians have gotten really good about, like, in that situation, knowing when to go out and say, the doctor's going to be a little bit delayed. There's a situation that he has to deal with. We appreciate your patience and helping with that, primarily because I've been there for them too. And I think that they know that I'm not just there to try to get a service out of them either. We're working together. We're in partnership. We know each other. And I think that's an important thing. Now, a lot of us have been burned, and a lot of us have been hurt before, making ourselves available that way. And so we do have to have a little bit of discernment in how we do it. But I think just being present and being willing to be compassionate is the first step. So.
No, there's something to say for boundaries, but you're right. There's something to say for making space for God to use you in an appointment or in a gap or in a, something that you, because you can just go from one to the next. And yet you're like, whoa, there's something going on with this person. I'm going to open the door. I'm going to ask them how they're doing. I'm going to look at them and not just sit there. And maybe 9 out of 10 are doing fine. And they're just going to the grocery store next, but maybe one of them has cancer, and God is going to, this appointment just changed a little bit. And you don't want to go, well, that's tough, but I got to see Boopsie in 2 seconds. So you need to, So it's good to have a staff that, and those next people, if they're communicated to, that's super. I like what you said about reminding people they don't have to know or have training or have to know the exact things. The Spirit will communicate, or, you will just show by your care. I mean, I think some of the reason people think that goes back to that imposter syndrome thing. And I think you're in such a unique situation, being a veterinarian, which is a profession that struggles with it, but also being a pastor, because the degree we got says Master of Divinity, and the silliest named degree on the planet is for someone to say, I've mastered the divine. There's nothing else to get. Ask me anything. So those two things are so I think give us a word about imposter syndrome and how to handle that, both as a veterinarian but as a pastor. I think you have a unique perspective there.
Yeah. So I the Saturday before Palm Sunday, I was performing a funeral for a friend. And one of the things that he had taught me very early on as a pastor, he was not a pastor, but he was one of my pastoral pillars, right? You got to have those people that you can lean on, that you can trust, that you can share your struggles with. And he was one of those guys for me. And he told me, like, before I was called as a pastor, I was talking to him about someone within our church. His wife has been very ill, and our church was without a pastor at that time. And I said something to him of the effect like, oh, I really wish that, it's a shame that we don't have a pastor to be able to help him as he navigates through this health issue with his wife. And he told me, he's like, why do you wait for a shepherd to show up when you have one that lives inside of you? And I was like, I was paused for a second. He's like, your job is just to follow the good shepherd who walks with you. So don't worry about what you know or what you do or who you are, because your identity is supposed to be in Christ, right? And so if Christ is calling you, then just go, because that's where he's going, and you're just joining him in his ministry. And that, I think, from an imposter syndrome, we unfortunately rely too much on who we are and not enough on who he is. And we think that If he's called us to something, it means that we have to be perfect all the time, that we have to know everything all the time. And what he calls us to is to trust him all the time, not necessarily be perfect. So that means that whether it's as a father or as a coach or as a pastor or a veterinarian, I'm going to fail. I'm going to mess up. I'm going to make mistakes. I just have to accept that. I can't be perfect to all people at all times, because if I could, then I would be Jesus, right? And so I have to learn to accept that if Christ has called me to something, I'm going to trust him. I'm going to do my very best. But I also recognize that my best is not going to be perfection, and that's okay. He didn't call me to be perfect. He called for his perfection to shine through me. So, and that can be hard. We bend over backwards as veterinarians and even as Christians, trying to be Jesus for everyone. But scripture says that the light shines through the broken vessel, right? It's our weaknesses that he's made strong. And so we have to be willing to be weak. And as veterinarians, as pastors, as dads, we don't want to be weak. We don't want to be imperfect. And yet the greatest lessons and the greatest opportunities for growth and teaching occur when we just don't quite measure up. And so that's okay. I'm willing to put myself out there, do my very best, but when I fail, because I know that I will, I will accept that as just part of my humanity and let him carry me through it.
And, I think even people give themselves a hard time. It's like we hear great advice and we hear good things and we look for loopholes or to justify. And I think about that word, do my best, because the flesh side of me goes, well, I could always do more. Like I could always study the scripture. Like so you being someone who has served in the field where you could keep helping one more person in Ethiopia after another 24/7, 365, but you also have how do you throw up, what is a boundary around doing my best? Because you did 60 something CE hours to get back up to speed. There, you could have done 120 if you really cared. Your best. Who needs sleep? So how do you put some healthy boundaries around that?
So this might be that whole starfish story, but I reflect on, so in church right now, we've been walking through since January a sermon series called Encountering Christ, and we're looking at encounters with Jesus and what the result of those encounters were from a scriptural standpoint. And one of the things that I've been impressed with is one, Jesus didn't heal everyone.
Yeah.
Right? Jesus didn't spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week serving everyone, because there's always one more person that needed something. He took time to go away and to pray. He took time to be with his disciples. He took, in a crowd, not everyone was healed. And that's just the reality. That's the reality of it. I love that story. You ever heard that story where the pastor who's continuously working, and someone in his congregation says, "Pastor, you're going to burn yourself out," and he said, "Well, the devil never takes a break." And he said, "Yeah, well, maybe you need a different
day
model.
Off.
You need a different role model."
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the thing that I keep thinking about. And then the other aspect to it is this. I think about when, the people that were front and center to most of the ministry of Jesus were the Pharisees. And they were the ones that were constantly pulling at him and questioning him and poking at him, questioning his every decision and what he did. And yet their hearts were hardened. And so just because you're helping someone doesn't necessarily mean that it is a life transformed for Christ. And that was the other part that I had to come to grips with, is I can do absolutely everything right all the time and still not have the outcome that I think should be there, right? We have to what's Paul say? I planted, Apollos watered, but the Holy Spirit gives the increase. I have to be prepared to do my portion of what God has called me in each of these different roles within my life. And there are times where I did that better and times that I did that worse. Sometimes I want to plant, water, and try to give the increase, force the increase too. But I have to learn how to do my part of what Christ has called me to. And I have to look with real honesty at what that means. Jesus did not call me to answer every phone call that my clients make to me. Jesus did not call me to spend every waking hour out of the field coaching kids in soccer. He didn't call me to. What did he call me to? He called me to take up my cross, follow him daily. I'm to trust him. I'm to walk in faith. I'm to grow in the Spirit. That priority first is my relationship with him, and from that there will be an outcropping of the things that then he calls me to do. But I need to consider all of those different factors together and be wise and discerning about what I do, and also not carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. God did not call me to save the entire world. He called me to join him as he is calling. And because I'm not eternal, omniscient, or omnipresent, I can't do all of those things, but I can do the part where he calls me. And that's hard to learn. It's hard to learn because, again, so many times, and even the examples, even that I've had, growing up, we have all those folks that are willing to burn themselves completely for the sake of others, and what's left is an empty shell. And oftentimes what remains it's not real fruit, because you're working on your own power, not trusting the Lord and listening to where he is too. That's the tough part. So I have to, and I still, it's one of those, that's a big struggle for me even now, knowing how much time, where, when, which words to who. Yeah. And once I perfect it, I'll let you know. We can do a whole podcast on.
We'll do it. Yep. We'll do it. How quickly you answer an email is related to godliness. All that. Yeah. We'll do. How
exactly.
Yeah. Well, to transition here, because you got to go give some hardware up to some soccer kids not too long from now. You mentioned the podcast, and we'll get you on some future ones too. This is fun. But when you started the podcast, you are the pod father. We are here with the pod father. What were your thoughts for the hopes for it? What do you still hope for it? What do you think the reach is for Two Roads Crossing?
So when I first met Dr. Dormany, I was sold, right? What I had been struggling with as a young man, as a young Christian, as a veterinary student, was how God was going to use me, how all those things fit together, how those different pieces of my life would somehow fit together, because I just didn't have a great vision or even a great understanding of how that was going to work. And when I met Dr. Dormany, it's like all those pieces fit together. I felt like Elizabeth, right? The spirit jumped within me, right? It was joyful. Like that's how I was like, oh, this is what it is. We
still get that at booths or at student visits. We still get I didn't know I could do these two things. I didn't know.
Absolutely. And I, even, thinking about, even we're so diverse as a profession. But there's opportunity, and there's a place for everyone within our profession to put their faith and their profession together in ways that many people just don't understand. And my thought for the podcast is that so like what you were talking about, going to a booth, to a student group, going to a conference, I loved having those conversations, sitting down with someone and hearing their God story, hearing their God sightings. How is God working in your life? I don't know. Maybe I'm a little bit crazy, but I don't know how many times after having those conversations, I wanted to join them. I wanted to go and do whatever they were doing.
Sure.
No, in full, I can't be everywhere and do, but I was just so excited about how God was moving in their life personally and professionally. And I was just humbled to be able to hear those stories. And so much of CVM is this kind of relational connection. But the problem is that those stories of sitting at the booth, I benefit from it, but there's thousands of other people who don't.
Sure.
And my thought, originally was, would there be a way for us to make those conversations more widely available? Every time we go to a real life, real impact, you have such wonderful speakers, and it's like they come and they speak, and it hits that little crowd.
Yeah.
And then that's it. And you're like, oh, I wish I could have been in that talk.
And
or
they're
that.
all so good.
They're all so
Just,
good. Exactly. And it's like, how do you preserve those types of things to make it available, right? Imagine if Matthew had never recorded his gospel, right?
Sure.
Us 12, we got it, but why do we need to spread it out to everybody? So there's a way to make those encounters with Christ available for more people to see. And the podcast, I thought, was, and this is maybe this is just me too. I'm not a real big lecture guy. Doing 60 hours of CE was more out of necessity, not out of desire. Right?
Pure joy. It wasn't pure joy.
No. It was not pure joy. And I want to be able to. I want that natural. The reality of this natural dialogue and conversation, to see real people in real situations with real emotion, making real decisions, maybe not even having all the answers, but showing how they're walking through it. And that was kind of my prayer for the podcast, was to take Dr. Dorminey's vision of being a veterinarian who sold out for Christ, and just making that opportunity available to speak into the lives of whomever has the opportunity to hear it. And for a podcast, I thought that might be an easy way for us to have a personal conversation that's made public. Yeah. And even now, thinking, I learned something new from a podcast the other day. I didn't realize that everyone called her EB because that used to be her last name. I thought it was because her name was Elizabeth. And I thought, it was just like EB instead of Elizabeth, right? And so I'm like, I just learned something new about someone that I'd worked. I didn't even know how wonderful it is to be able to hear people's stories, to hear people's lives, to be impacted by them, to hear from around the world, from clinics, from people that are struggling with national boards, people that are struggling, with divorce and infertility and all these things that weigh on so many people's hearts. Just being able to connect, and that's kind of my my prayer even for the podcast going forward. I appreciate just the openness and the willingness for people to come and share, but also that God is able to speak through those lives and reach, more folks who can say, hey, I was considering going back to practice after 10 years. I don't think that I can do it. Maybe there's an opportunity for someone to hear that it might make a difference for them. Or
100%. Yeah.
I didn't pass my national boards the first time. And so what does that mean for my life? And so having people connect in that way, I think is vitally important. So I appreciate how it's continuing, and appreciate hopefully the folks that have been listening have been, benefiting and being blessed by the content too.
Well, and so many of our listeners or watchers have things in common, but one of the things we all have in common is that while remains knowable, also a mystery, and that's God. And so when you hear how different people have interacted with God, you hear how God has spoken to them, you hear how there have been some incredible highs and some incredible lows, you can go, I'm not alone here. Yeah. Or I recognize this pattern, or I learn a little bit more about God by hearing about somebody else's walk with God. How much it's not that God wants to make himself mysterious, but he's God and we just can't, right? And so it's just almost another piece of the puzzle of just learning our Lord, right? And it's just really cool to hear that. And we thank you for sharing part part of that today with us. So let me hit you with two final questions then.
Sure.
One, let's we bring two roads crossing together. Let's start with one of the roads. What do you love about veterinary medicine?
Oh, I love the opportunity to serve
Mhm.
people, all of God's creation, to provide love in a relationship that's also loving, that bond that exists between um, God's creation and humanity, and to be that shepherd that helps in times of need for both patients and for clients. I love that opportunity to extend myself in that way, to be challenged in that way, and the opportunity to see God work in some pretty miraculous ways too.
Yeah, amen to that. Yeah, and despite anybody's use of Dr. Google,
Hmm.
they need
Yeah,
veterinary professionals to help them
right.
in that spot, right? So,
That's right.
well, what is one last thought? Faithful encouragement you'd like to leave with our listeners today?
So, you know, um, before we did this, I was working on my sermon for Sunday, um, having just come out of Holy Week and talking about different encounters
I
with
mean,
Christ.
Jesus has risen. Aren't you done for the
Yeah,
rest of the
that's it.
year?
We're done for the year. We kind of wrap things up a little bit in a little bow, and then we're done. It's
That's right.
all music from here on out.
Yeah.
But one of the things that impressed me, even just this morning, about the resurrection story, was the message that was given to Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary, the mother of James, when they're asked, "Why do you seek him among the dead?" And I got thinking and just kind of meditating on that this morning. That in so much of our lives, we look for Jesus in the dead things of our life.
Hmm.
And even though Jesus will show up in our despair and show up in our sorrow and show up when we make bad choices and show up when we sin, he'll show up, but he shows up to rescue us and to pull us out of death.
Hmm.
And so in my life, there's so many things, and I'd encourage other folks to, there's so many times that we just keep going back to the tomb because that's what we're used to doing.
We
You
know
just
where it is.
We know where it is. We know what we're responsible to do. We go back to the cross. We go back to the tomb, and we expect to find Jesus in those dead places. But he's living. He's out on the road.
Active.
He's active. He's walking. And I was reading a book by Greg Finke, joining Jesus in mission, how to be an everyday missionary. And he talks about how so much of the church today builds bridges where there are no longer rivers, because that's what we just do. The river has changed its course, but we've always built bridges in this location, so that's what we're going to do. Jesus is out on the road. We've got to stop looking for him in those dead things. And in some of our lives, I think that, and even in my own life, I keep going back to the tomb over and over and over again, expecting him to be there. And I needed to lift my eyes up and look beyond the tomb and encounter him among the living. And that means sometimes you have to leave behind some things that are no longer supposed to be a part of your life. You need to move on to where he is. You need to join him where he is. And some of those things might have been really good things that you need to leave behind. You
build a memorial. You stack some stones, but
stack some stones, and move on, because that's living faith. That's worshiping in spirit and in truth. That is seeking the living God. And I think it's what I would leave with folks, because, it's hard trust me, it's hard making transitions. It's hard going into something or leaving behind something you've been a part of for a very long time. but sometimes that's where Jesus is calling you. And sometimes you need to trust the shepherd that's in you and just follow him. And you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised at what's on the other side of the tomb. I think it's called life. And life with Jesus is an abundant life.
Well, cheers to that. Very well. I'm going to get you as the 100th episode to sign us out. And then I'll have to go back and remember to hit record so we get the episode.
Been there, done that too.
Good dry run we just did. All right, Barry. Sign us out, buddy.
Well, Curtis, thank you for having me on this Two Hosts Crossing 100th episode. It's amazing. And I love being able to celebrate that with you, God continuing to speak to his people. And for everyone who's listening, hey, I've missed seeing you on a weekly basis, but I pray that God has been speaking to you loud and clear, that you've heard the voice of the shepherd, and that you are following him with your whole heart. Maybe sometime we'll catch up again and we can talk about how good God is, especially at the intersection of two roads crossing.
Thank you for listening to Two Roads Crossing, a podcast production of the Christian Veterinary Mission. If you are blessed by this content, like and subscribe so that you are alerted when new content is released. If you would like more information about CVM, or if you have questions, comments, or topical suggestions, you can find us online at www.cvm.org. Or you can contact us by emailing podcast@cvm.org. God has a plan for the nations, and that plan includes you. We pray that CVM has encouraged you to live out your calling with confidence and competence. So, until next time, may the voice of the shepherd ring loud and clear as you follow him in faith to the intersection of two roads crossing.